Sanjay said, "To him Arjun, whose eyes were brimming with tears of grief because he was overcome by pity, Madhusudan spoke thus. The Lord said, 'From what cause, O Arjun, does this unmanly, un-Arjun-like, heaven-barring, and shameful despair come over you at this perilous spot? Don't give in, O Part, to unmanliness, for it does not become you. So, O Parantap, stand up and drive away this disgraceful weakness of your heart.'" Arjun said, "How? O Madhusudan, slayer of enemies, shall I shoot arrows in the battle against men like Bhishma and Drona, who deserve only my honor? Even to live in this world as a mendicant begging for alms is better than killing teachers, for if I kill them, all my joys and riches and desires in this world will be drenched in their blood. I hardly know which is better, the Kauravs conquering us or our conquering them, even Dhritarashtra's sons, who are our enemies, and yet after killing whom we may not wish to live. With my mind swamped with feeble pity and confusion regarding duty, I entreat you to instruct me as to what is definitely conducive to my glory, for I am your disciple and have taken refuge in you. I do not see that obtaining an undisputed and profitable dominion over the whole earth, or, for that matter, even lordship over the gods, can cure the grief that is wearing out my senses." Sanjay said, after having thus spoken to Rishikesh, Arjun, the conqueror of sleep and destroyer of foes, told Govind, Krishna, that he would not fight, and then he fell silent. Rishikesh then, "O Bharat, Dhritarashtra," with a smile as it appeared, spoke thus to him, Arjun, who sat mournfully between the two armies. The Lord said, "Although sorrowing over those who ought not to be grieved for, you yet speak wise words. But the discriminating mourn over neither the living nor those who are dead. It is not that either you or I or all these kings did not exist in the past, nor is it that our being will come to an end in the future. Since the embodied spirit passes through infancy, youth, and old age in the body, and then transmigrates into another body, men with steadfast minds do not grieve over his passing away. There are sensations of heat and cold, and of pain and pleasure, O son of Kunti, as senses meet their objects. Bear them patiently, O Bharat, because they have a beginning and an end, and are transient. So, O the noblest of men, Arjun, one who is possessed of equanimity in pain and pleasure, and firm and untormented by these feelings produced by the meeting of senses with their objects, deserves to taste the nectar of immortality. The unreal has no being, and the real has no non-being, and the truth about both has also been seen by men who know the reality. Know that since the spirit which pervades the universe is imperishable and immutable, no one can effect his destruction. Fight, O Bharat, Arjun, because while the bodies which clothe the soul are said to come to an end, the embodied spirit itself is forever, indestructible, and boundless. They are both ignorant, he who believes that the self slays and he who thinks that he is slain, for he neither slays, nor is he slain. Neither ever born nor dying, neither at any time coming into being, nor ceasing to be. The Self is birthless, perpetual, unchanging, and timeless, and he is not destroyed when the body is destroyed. How can he, O part, who is conscious of the soul within as imperishable, permanent, birthless, and immutable, kill or move another to kill? Like a man who puts on new garments after discarding his worn-out clothes, the embodied self also casts off tattered bodies and transmigrates into other bodies that are new. This self is neither pierced by weapons, nor burnt by fire, nor made damp by water, nor dried up by wind. The self, which cannot be pierced or burnt or made wet or faded, is uninterrupted, all-pervasive, constant, immovable, and eternal. Knowing that the self is unmanifest, a non-object to the senses, incomprehensible because he is a non-object to the mind, and changeless, O Arjun, it does not befit you to grieve over him. You ought not to grieve, O the mighty-armed, even if you think of him, the Self, as ever born and ever dying. Since this also proves the certain death of what is born, and the certain birth of what dies, you ought not to grieve over the inevitable. Why grieve over the matter, O Bharat Arjun, when all beings disembodied before birth and disembodied after death appear to possess a body only between the two events? Only a seer views the soul as a marvel. Another one describes him as a marvel, and yet another one hears him as a marvel, while there are some who hear him and yet know him not. Since the Self dwelling in all bodies is unslayable, O Bharat, it does not befit you to grieve for living beings. In view of your own dharma also, it is unworthy of you to fear, for there is nothing more propitious for a Kshatriya than a righteous war. Blessed indeed, O part, are the Kshatri who, without seeking, come upon such a war which is like an open door to heaven. And if you do not engage in this righteous war, you will lose the dharma of yourself and glory, and be guilty of sin. And all will forever speak of your disgrace, and such disgrace is worse than death itself for a man of honor. Even the great warriors who have a high regard for you will then scorn you for having turned your back upon the war out of fear. There can be nothing more painful for you than the disparaging and improper words your adversaries will speak against your valor. Rise up with determination for the war, because if you die in it, you will attain to heaven, and if you win, you will attain to the most exalted glory. You will not incur sin if you get up and fight the war, treating victory and defeat, profit and loss, and happiness and sorrow alike. This knowledge which I have imparted to you, O part, is related to Jnana Yoga, the way of knowledge. And now you should listen to me on Karma Yoga, the way of selfless action, with which you can successfully sever the fetters of action as well as its consequence, karma. Since selfless action neither wears out the seed from which it sprang, nor has any adverse consequence. Even a partial observance of this dharma liberates one from the dire terror of repeated birth and death. On this auspicious path, O Kuru Nandan, Arjun, the resolute mind is one, but the minds of the ignorant are divided and many. Desire-ridden men, O Parth, who are given only to listening to Vedic promises of rewards for action, who believe that the attainment of heaven is the highest goal of temporal birth and its activities, and who speak pretentious words to describe the many rites and ceremonies that they regard as conducive to the achievements of worldly pleasure and power, are ignorant and bereft of discernment. Delighted by ornamental words and attached to worldly pleasures and dominance, men without discrimination have irresolute minds. Since all the Ved, O Arjun, only illumine the three properties, you should rise above them. Be free from the contradictions of happiness and sorrow. Rest on that which is constant, and be unconcerned with getting what you do not have, as well as with protecting what you do have, in order to dedicate yourself to the self within. After the final absolution, a man does not need the Ved, just as we do not need a pond when there is the all-stretching ocean around. Since you are entitled only to the performance of action, but never to the fruits thereof, you should neither desire rewards of action, nor be drawn to inaction. The equipoise of mind that arises from profound absorption in the performance of action, after renouncing attachment and being even-minded in respect of success and failure, is, O Dhananjay, Arjun, given the name of Yog. Take refuge in the way of equanimity, Yog, Dhananjay, because action with desire for the fruits thereof is far inferior to the path of discrimination, and they are indeed paupers who are motivated by lust for rewards. As the soul endowed with a mind of equanimity renounces both meritorious and evil deeds in this world itself, and the art of acting with equipoise is Yog, the endeavor to master the way of equanimity, of discrimination, is Samatva Yoga. Renouncing all desire for the fruits of their action, and thus freed from the bondage of birth, wise men who are skilled in the way of equanimity and discrimination achieve the pure, immortal state. At the time when your mind has successfully made its way across the swamp of attachment, you will be capable of the renunciation, which is worth hearing of and which you have heard. When your mind, now shaken by the conflicting precepts of the Ved, achieves a changeless and constant existence within the being of Supreme Spirit, you will then attain to immortal state through profound meditation. Arjun said, "What, O Keshav, is the mark of the man who has attained to the state of true meditation and equanimity of mind? And how does this man with firm discrimination speak, sit, and walk?" The Lord said, "A man is then said to be steadfast in mind when he has renounced all the desires of his mind and achieved contentment of the self through the self. He is indeed a steady-minded sage who is unmoved by sorrow and indifferent to happiness, and who has overcome his passions, fear, and anger. That man has a steady mind who is entirely free from attachment, and who neither gloats over success nor abhors failure. As a turtle pulls in its limbs, this man reins in his senses from all objects, and then he truly has a steady mind. While objects of sensual pleasure cease to be for the man who withdraws his senses from them, his desire for these objects yet remains. But the desires of the man of discrimination are completely erased by his perception of God. O son of Kunti, men ought to subdue their senses, which seize forcibly even wise and striving minds, and devote themselves to me with perfect concentration, because only that man's mind is unwavering who has achieved control of his senses. They whose thoughts are of sensual objects are attached to them. Attachment gives rise to desires, and anger is born when these desires are obstructed. Delusion is born from anger, by which memory is confused. Confusion of memory undermines the faculty of discrimination, and when discrimination is lost, the seeker deviates from the means of absolution. But that man achieves spiritual tranquility who has mastered his mind, and who remains unaffected by sense objects, although he may be roaming amidst them, because his senses are properly restrained. After realizing the ultimate repose, all the seeker's sorrows disappear, and the blissful mind of such a man quickly grows in firmness. A man without spiritual accomplishment has no wisdom nor true faith. How can such men be happy? For, as the wind captures the boat on water, just so, even one of the senses, that roam amidst objects of their gratification and with which the intellect dwells, is strong enough to sweep away the discrimination of one who is unpossessed of spiritual attainment. Therefore, O the mighty-armed Arjun, the man who prevents his senses from straying to objects has a steady discrimination. The true worshipper, yogi, remains awake amidst what is night for all creatures. But the perishable and transient worldly pleasures amidst which all living creatures stay awake are like night for the sage who has perceived reality. As the water of many rivers falls into the full and ever-constant ocean without affecting its tranquility, even so the pleasures of sense merge into a man of steady discrimination without producing any deviation, and such a man attains to the state of the most sublime peace, rather than yearn for sensual enjoyment. The man who has renounced all desire, and who conducts himself without ego, arrogance, and attachment, is the one who achieves peace. Such, O Arjun, is the steadfastness of the man who has realized God. After attaining to this state, he subdues all temptation, and resting firmly in his faith, with his death, he continues in this state of rapture, of the union of his self with God.